Well, we're continuing our series in Lessons from a Legendary Leader. We spent nearly the entire first half of the series talking about negative lessons we learned from the life of the legendary leader Solomon. And last week we began to flip just a little and start looking at some positive lessons we can learn from him, not so much from his life, but from his writings, because his writings were inspired by God. And so his writings that are given to us primarily in the book of Proverbs are lessons that come from him, but through the mind of God, and he did a better job with his writing than he did with his life. So we're going to focus, first of all, this morning on Proverbs 15:22, which says, "Plans go wrong for lack of advice. Many advisors bring success." So that's a pretty easy contrast to see there. Go it alone and you're likely to mess up. Bring in many and consider all their opinions. You got a better chance of success. The reason for that is we all know a little. Nobody knows everything. I mean, think about it in those terms. We all know a little. Nobody knows absolutely everything. Most of us, myself included, are deeply knowledgeable in a few things, and we're totally ignorant and inexperienced in a million other things. There are very few 5-talent men who have 5-talent knowledge about virtually everything. So the only possible way then to really have your success that is spoken of in this verse is to seek help and counsel and effective partnering with others who know more than you do on a particular subject. So I'm talking about asking for the help of advisors, counselors, mentors, Bible class teachers, anyone who can provide us with the knowledge and skills that we need to achieve excellence as we go on through our lives. The truly diligent and the truly spiritual don't just seek counsel when a situation is in trouble. They seek it from the very beginning. They ask for God's help and God's counsel and God's advice from the very beginning before they begin an effort. And that greatly reduces the risk of failure and significantly increases the possibility of success. Proverbs 16:16 says, "How much better to get wisdom than gold? How much better to get good judgment than silver?" So, Solomon tells us to seek wisdom as if it were a hidden treasure. True wisdom is rarely found on the ground in plain view while you're not looking for it. You rarely stumble over true wisdom. Usually it's a treasure that has to be searched out. And those seeking it sometimes have to dig well below the surface. But like when we were kids, it's fun to search for buried treasure. It is a fun thing to be able to, as an adult, gather a group of people that you care about and that you feel have knowledge or experience in a given area and learn from them. My favorite moment in teaching ever, and I sometimes see it in here and with some of you, is when, but mostly in a teen class is where I've seen it, is when you're teaching some important truth or wisdom and you just see a light bulb go off in the person's mind. That's what he's talking about here. And in Solomon's writing, he uses a number of words to convey the concept of partnering. But most of the time, he uses the word counselor or counsel. And I like his choice of words because they're words we use today. We can understand them well. When we think of a partner, we usually think of a legal partner or a marital partner. A counselor, on the other hand, is somebody who gives us needed advice, consultation, direction, knowledge, wisdom in a particular area. And that's what he's going to tell us throughout all these verses today we really need. It can be a legal partner, but it could also be a friend. It could be a spouse. It could be a coworker. It could be an employee. It could be an advisor, a mentor, a fellow church member, a small group leader. When you study the book of Proverbs, you are making, in effect, Solomon your counselor. And that's a pretty good one. That's a pretty good one. I was just watching this past week because I'm so excited it's football season. And I was watching on my workout a Sports Center show, and they interviewed the New York Jets quarterback. I hardly know who he is. His name is Justin Fields. But they asked him a question about what had made a difference in his life in his off season. And he said, well, I started to read the Bible every day. And he said, I read the book of Proverbs every single day. And then he chided the media, and he said, I would advise it to you guys out there in the media. You'd learn some things. You'd get some wisdom if you would read the book of Proverbs every day. Well, that's true. Reading the book of Proverbs every day is like making Solomon your partner. It's like making Solomon your counselor. So most people have the problem, though, of only seeking a counselor or a partner when they're in trouble or when they have an obvious need that they can't handle by themselves. And that is especially true of men. I mean, I have been known in years past to wander hopelessly around cities or neighborhoods while my wife is begging me to stop and ask for directions or call somebody and get directions. Solomon knew better. He would not even consider undertaking a significant endeavor without first getting advice, first getting counsel. What did he know that most of us don't know? He knew that enlisting the aid of wise counselors and good partners was critical to achieving success and achieving it as soon as possible. He knew that all effective partnering offered tremendous benefits. And he knew that you shouldn't tackle any major decision or project without getting the kind of counsel and advice that would help you to gain success. We've all heard the statement, well, I did the best I could. I've heard 1,000 times, said different ways. I can't do it any better. This is as good as it gets. I could never do that. I tried. I did the best that I could. All of those statements may very well be true in that they reflect that, well, I said a moment ago that we all know a little, but nobody knows everything. All of those statements are true in that they reflect that we all have personal limitations when trying to do something by ourselves. However, they're also completely false. If that person were to try to recruit counselors or partners, advisors, they would have achieved far more than they ever will by themselves. And that's why Proverbs 15:22, Solomon tells us that without counsel, your purpose, your plans, your goals, or work will be frustrated or maybe even completely stopped. That's why Ecclesiastes 4:9 says 2 people are better than 1, for you double your chance of success and you help each other succeed. In my second book, I spent nearly a whole chapter talking about developing a Christian cabinet. Just like the President of the United States has a cabinet, and the cabinet advises him on particular issues where they may know more than he does on a given subject. Every person should have a cabinet. I'll give you an example of that later on, how it really saved me from a mess, having a cabinet with somebody who kept me out of some serious trouble. But every person should have a Christian cabinet, a group of advisors that are skilled particularly in one area, just like Solomon is talking about here. Did you know that nearly 75% of all new businesses fail within their first year of operation? Now, nobody goes in thinking they're going to fail. Did you know that every couple enters marriage truly believing that they are going to live happily ever after? Yet for more than 50 years, the divorce rate has hovered right around 50%, 1 out of 2. Nobody goes into marriage thinking it's going to fail. But the failure rates in business and in management and in marriage are cut by 2/3, studies have shown. By 2/3 when counselors are brought into the equation before the business is started or before the marriage vows are exchanged in premarital counseling. That's exactly what Solomon's talking about in these verses. That's exactly what he's talking about. Sometimes late at night, my go-to show for 30 minutes to an hour just to sort of lay there and relax is Shark Tank. I really like Shark Tank. Does anybody else watch Shark Tank any? Yeah. I like it because they're, these inventors are, trying to get investors, but they're not really wanting just their money. In fact, they're not wanting their money most of all. They're wanting their counsel, their guideship, their mentorship, their ability to help them to succeed. That's the same thing that Solomon is talking about here. Have you ever suffered a fall? Nobody ever plans to fall. 2 years ago, about right now, I had torn my meniscus in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm going to have knee replacement for it a month from yesterday. Thank God. But that was the beginning of me carrying my knee around and being miserable. And you're going to just think about this. In a couple of months, you're going to have a much more cheerful preacher. That's what's going to happen because I'm in pain pretty well every step that I take. But anyway, it was fresh. The meniscus had just been torn a week or two before. And I was teaching the full room of the teenagers down here in VBS. And we all got down. I got down on one knee in front of them, and we took a picture and sang a song and goofy stuff that you do when you're with teenagers. And I started to try to get up, and I tried to get up on the knee, the right knee, which is the one with the torn meniscus. And I started falling, and I mean falling fast. And Eli Moore caught me and drugged me. He caught me. I was very thankful for that. Then he drugged me across the room to the chairs. I wasn't quite as thankful for that. My back was so back burned from the carpet burns that my back hurt worse than my knee did. And really, my pride was hurt more than any of that put together. That was really the problem, was my pride. But I had not planned to fall. But it happens to all of us. Now, the man who changed about as many lives as anybody in America during the last century, Dr. Robert Atkins, the factor of the drink, it's called 1,000 things, the drinking man's diet and high protein and a million things, the Atkins diet. He wasn't so fortunate. Great health. He spent all his life doing this diet that had made him in great condition, great health. He'd helped all these other people lose weight, get their body chemistry in order and all. And I'm sure as he took the step out of his house one morning in New York City, he had no idea he was about to take the last step he would ever take. He never saw a little piece of ice that caused his fall, and upon landing, he hit his head, and he never woke up. He died days later from a coma and never woke up. Solomon tells us in Proverbs 11:14, that's going to happen to any of us. Any of us are going to fall without advisors. The terrifying aspect of a fall are, and I can tell you from mine, you never see it coming, you lose all control, and you will suffer injury to one degree or another. And the same is true in your life, Solomon is saying here. Without seeking counsel or partners, sooner or later you will fall. It's not a matter of if, but when. Said another way, don't seek counsel in your work, you will fail. Don't seek counsel in your marriage, you will fail. Don't seek counsel in your parenting, you will fail. Don't seek counsel in your finances, you will fail. There are people who know more about all of those subjects than you do, who can be very helpful to you and can be mentors to you. Proverbs 13:18 says, if you ignore criticism, you'll end up in poverty and disgrace. If you accept correction, you will be honored. Solomon says this over and over and over again in so many different ways in the Proverbs, that the person who refuses instruction or counsel will experience both poverty and disgrace, or as one translation says, actually shame. Best example I could think of that in my lifetime, because I was a young man when this was happening, was when Richard Nixon was in the White House, and it's crazy that a stupidly planned scandal like Watergate, it was unnecessary, it was not very well planned. It would have, the Home Alone burglars, it seems like, were the ones who pulled it off. And it's just amazing to me how that brought him down. But what really brought him down in the end, and Richard Reeves in his book tells this beautifully, is how he sent everybody away. He no longer took any counseling. He no longer took any advice. He was basically alone. The last person was his Secretary of State, Kissinger, and he kind of tossed him out to the side too, and sat in the Oval Office drinking and depressed and avoiding good counsel. And he crashed deeply. Because, as Proverbs 20:18 says, plans succeed through good counsel. Don't go to war without good advice. According to Solomon, by recruiting and effectively utilizing a number of counselors or partners in important endeavors, that's how you will succeed in life. That's how you will reduce your risk of failure. Proverbs 11:14 says, without wise leadership, a nation falls. There is safety in having many advisors. Simply seeking a single opinion is not enough to stop a fall. That's what he's saying here. Solomon claims that if we want to be sure we're making the best decision possible on an important issue of concern, we need many counselors. In chapter 24, he said, so don't go to war without wise guidance. Victory depends on having many advisors. Solomon is literally talking about actual war here, but his recommendation is applicable to any action or any competition. By seeking wise counsel before you initiate action, you're far more likely to choose your battles wisely and win the battles you choose. So often, we create conflict with our spouses or with our children or with our fellow workers over issues that are insignificant. They're not worth fighting over. Objective counselors and advisors will often help us see such issues in their proper perspective. If you go to a good marriage counselor or a good family counselor or a good child counselor, the first thing they will do is make sure they narrow down what the really single most important issue is. They won't let you wander all over the board. They won't say, well, we can hit this, that. No, they'll bring you back to the one thing that is at the center of the problem, and then they'll help you approach the center so that you can then attack the wheel. And that's how you gain wisdom that will help you the rest of your life. Here's another way. Very simple. Chapter 13, verse 20 says, walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. I mean, how simple is that? How simple is that? How true is that? So many times I have witnessed that we become like our friends. Slowly but surely, we become like our friends. That's why they're our friends. That's why we chose them or they chose us in the first place. The truth of 1 Corinthians 15:33 is don't be fooled by those who say such things, because bad company corrupts good character. Always has, always will. Walk with the wise, you'll be wiser. Get counsel from the wise, you'll be wiser. Walk with fools, those who mess up all the time. That's why so many people who begin a life of crime make their friends in the life of crime, and then they just keep getting advice and hanging out and experiencing life with people who are constantly involved in crime and making bad or wrong decisions. And they wind up that way, just stays that way. If you follow Solomon's counsel in troubled times, you will have somebody to help you out. Now, this is my favorite passage in all the Bible. It teaches that. Since we're learning lessons from the legendary leader Solomon, this is one of his best lessons, and it addresses the subject we're talking about this morning. Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Now think about that. Before we go any further, just think about that with an elderly person who falls at home alone. They often die. Not because they couldn't have been treated, but because they were alone. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Nobody sails through life without experiencing trials and unexpected falls. We all do. Sooner or later, it happens to all of us. Solomon states what should be obvious and yet seems to be missed by most, that with a good partner, a good counselor, a good advisor, a good friend, there will always be someone there to come to your aid and pick you up. And what may have been a permanent setback often becomes a temporary setback. But Solomon never said partner with just anybody. And he makes that clear in another one of the Proverbs. Putting confidence in an unreliable person in times of trouble is like chewing with a broken tooth or walking on a lame leg. As you've all seen me already try to do. Picking the wrong partner in any area of our life can produce life-altering consequences. So, Solomon, trying to help us out, give us some lessons in leadership, some lessons we need to know, then gives us red flags to watch out for in choosing an advisor or a counselor, choosing somebody to be on your Christian cabinet. And the first is integrity. Make sure the person you choose has integrity. If you assist a thief, you only hurt yourself. You are sworn to tell the truth, but you dare not testify. Solomon really means there deep down that a person who steals literally steals not only another person's possessions, he steals their heart, he steals their character, he suppresses their honesty, their integrity, and often will do it just for the sake of a little self-gratification in the pursuit of ambition. A man who lies on his income tax return, cheats on his wife, does personal business on company time is just as much of a thief as one who snatches a purse or steals a car or robs a bank. Integrity is integrity. Honesty is honesty. It's not the size of the stolen property. The only difference is the target and the degree of the dishonesty. A man who is dishonest with others will sooner or later be dishonest with you. Everybody has lied or cheated at least once in their life. Everybody has. But most people feel guilty about it. And their action usually represents an exception in their life rather than a norm. And these are the people Solomon warns about. Parents, grandparents. When you have a child who lies, cheats, or steals for the first time, or at least the first time that you have caught them, you got to make that a really big deal. A really big deal. So that they understand that integrity and honesty matter. So that they understand that character counts. I have actually seen parents who laugh at their children when they do something like that. Think it's cute. Well, it might be cute when they're 6, maybe even 7 or 8. It won't be when they're 16 or 18 or 26 or 28. You got to make a big deal about it. Solomon is warning here about people who are quick to rationalize or excuse their own dishonesty. People for whom dishonest behavior is pretty much the rule of their life rather than the exception. And to get advice or counsel or partner with such a person inevitably is guaranteed to compromise your own behavior as well. Character does count. Integrity should be the most important trait we look for, definitely when choosing a marriage partner, when choosing a mate, when choosing a business partner, when choosing a counselor. The marriage of one of my best friends was destroyed by choosing an unscrupulous marriage counselor. We had another person in our church many years ago who had an affair, went to a secular counselor rather than a Christian marriage counselor, and the secular counselor said affairs are normal, there's nothing wrong with that. He was a secular humanist who was also an agnostic. He said, well, this is normal behavior, and if you don't love your spouse, you should leave them. And thankfully, the person went to me and the elders and got a way different viewpoint, and didn't, but almost stepped away from their family, their marriage and their family. You have to be very careful choosing an advisor, a mate, a counselor, but choose the right ones, and they make an enormous difference in your life. So what Solomon is doing here is he's telling us, watch for these red flags when choosing people that are going to influence your life so much. Watch for these red flags. And another one he gives us is quick temper or a deep-seated anger. Don't befriend angry people or associate with hot-tempered people. Proverbs 22:24 says, now, everybody occasionally loses their temper, but Solomon's talking about a man or woman whose very character is permeated with anger. Such people are quick to lose their temper because the root cause of their anger has never been effectively dealt with. And so here we're warned simply not to form any bond or partnership with an angry person. I have counseled many women who were physically, verbally, emotionally, and in an instance or two, even spiritually, very afraid of their husband. And they were stuck. They were stuck because they were afraid to live with him, but They were afraid that if they tried to leave him, he'd kill them. You know, the best way to stop that is not start it. Don't form any bond or partnership with an angry person. An angry person will set aside reason and personal responsibility in matters of conscience under the driving force of their inner anger. And sooner or later, we've all known people who their anger has brought them down and brought down the people around them as well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be kind or outgoing to an angry person. You certainly can. It just says don't enter an interdependent relationship with them. Don't enter an interdependent relationship. You can be nice. You can be kind. You can be maybe an outer circle of friend, but be careful about an interdependent relationship. Also, he makes it very clear not to choose as an advisor or a counselor or a partner somebody who's a fool. Now, we would think that just makes sense. You stay away from fools, for you won't find knowledge on their lips. Solomon tells us that if we seek wise counsel and we partner with wise people, we'll gain wisdom that'll serve us throughout our life. I'm still gaining wisdom regularly from my two mentors that I have had for 55 years of my life. So we will find that kind of wisdom if we look for it, if we seek it, search it. But the opposite is also true. If we partner with the kind of person that Solomon calls a fool, well, sometimes what happens is we spend enough time with a fool and we lose the ability to have true discernment ourselves. We can start to think a little bit like a fool by spending that. Well, now, when you hear the word fool, what comes to your mind? There are a lot of things that probably comes to people's mind. I mean, if you're the right age, the term fool might bring to your mind somebody like Mr. T, who was well known for saying, "I pity the fool." Many of you may think of April Fool's Day or equate foolishness with being tricked. Still others of you may think of some lovable but foolish character like Barney Fife. The term fool has a lot of connotations in our society today. So when we talk about how to handle fools, it's important to make sure that we define a fool in the same way. And the contrast between foolish people and wise people, honestly, is probably the major theme of the book of Proverbs and Solomon's wisdom to us. I mean, wisdom is really the key to the whole book. And so we have this interesting verse that seems to contradict itself on the surface. Don't answer the foolish argument of fools, or you will become as foolish as they are. Got that? Then the next line says, be sure to answer the foolish argument of fools, or they will become wise in their own estimation. So this is a strange passage because it seems like the two verses contradict each other. But the Bible doesn't contradict itself, and the author wouldn't have put these two verses together if he thought they were contradictory. So what do they mean? I think they point out the difficulty in dealing with foolish people. On the one hand, we know that what they are doing and saying is wrong, and we want to help them. But on the other hand, we know that fools tend to not listen to what other people have to say and tend to be overbearing in their foolishness. And if we're not careful, they will drag us along with it. So we need discretion in how or when or if we respond. You know, the temptation when dealing with a person making a foolish argument is to argue back. I've done it many times. With a person of understanding, that works. You exchange rational arguments to try to arrive at the right answer. The problem, Solomon is saying over and over here with arguing with a foolish person, is they're not interested in hearing what you have to say. They're going to keep arguing with you no matter what you say. So if we continue arguing with a foolish person, we run the danger of becoming like them, resorting to foolish tactics ourselves in order to win. And he's really saying there is no winning in an argument with a fool because they're a fool. You know, there's an old saying that says, never wrestle with a pig because you both get dirty and the pig likes it. The same thing is true when we find ourselves trying to answer the argument of a fool. Our strategy needs to be to do our best to show the truth, to show God's word and the wisdom, but when it becomes apparent they're unwilling to listen, to then walk away. Don't just continue arguing with a fool. When you argue with somebody who won't listen, you are simply wasting your time. You have surely in this day and age seen that on social media, or at least most of you have. If I see people fussing and fighting on social media, I just hide them, or whatever it is you do. You know, hide them, I think, is what you do. I don't just completely defriend them, but I hide them. I get them out of my because of all these verses. Because of all these verses. I don't want to become like them. Somebody makes a statement in order to provoke an argument, and a lot of other people take the bait, and nothing is accomplished other than people insulting each other and getting very frustrated. Now, we need to discern when a person's willing to listen or not, whether we're willing to listen or not. And if a person isn't willing to, we shouldn't waste our time. Our words won't have any effect anyway. I mean, we understand this inherently with our children, don't we? What do you do when your child throws a tantrum? When they throw themselves on the floor and yell and scream, do you give them what they want? I hope not. Parents understand generally in the midst of that situation, they need to see the big picture. Even though they desperately want their child to stop making a scene, they know at that point if they give their child what they want, they're telling the child they can always get what they want by making a scene. It may stop the tantrum that is going on right that minute, but it will lead to multiple tantrums in the future. And that strategy will backfire. Solomon is saying, same thing's true with a fool. You've got to refuse to reward foolish behavior. Sometimes that means refusing to give in to a grown-up's temper tantrum. Ignoring the threats made by the foolish person in order to help them understand that is no such way to affect change. My father was a genius at it. Simple man, very, very simple man. My mother was argumentative, could be difficult, very smart, but argumentative, could be very difficult. When she would start fussing at him, he would not fuss back at all. He would simply walk slowly to the kitchen, get his keys, start whistling, and he would whistle his way all the way out to his car and take off, and he would turn back to my brother or I and say, I'm going down on the pike. That was Nolensville Pike. And then he would let her cool off long enough and him cool off enough, and he would come back, and he wouldn't be whistling anymore. He was getting away from what was about to become a really foolish fight. It was brilliant strategy at the time. You see, dealing with fools is not only about what we should not do, there are also some things we should do. And I want to make this clear. We should listen to what they have to say. We should listen to what everybody has to say. I am frightened by what is happening in our country, that neither side of political divisions will even listen to one another. That's very dangerous. The danger in labeling a person a fool is that we think it gives us license to ignore anything they have to say. And when we refuse to listen to others, we're being foolish ourselves. The wise thing to do with any foolish person is to listen what they are saying and try to evaluate whether or not it's true. We may not like it when we're being criticized by somebody that we think is an unwise or foolish person, but we need to evaluate and make sure that what they are saying is not true. And if it is true, we should quietly try to change it. I've told this story many, many times before, but I was privileged early in my ministry to get to know the preacher of the largest Church of Christ in the world, Ira North at Madison Church of Christ. They had over 4,000 members. And we had a television program back to back with him. His program was on at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Ours was on at 8:30. And so I went to his office one time and I said, give me some tips on television program. And I will never forget, as long as I live, what he said. He said, my best tip to you is listen to your critics. Your critics will tell you things you need to hear that your friends won't tell you because they're trying to spare your feelings. So you should always listen to your critics. That doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Just listen to them and evaluate what they're saying, because they will tell you things that you really need to hear that maybe your friends or family won't tell you. That's wisdom. That's what these passages are talking about. The temptation for us is to look down on fools and to think of ourselves as superior to them. And that kind of an attitude is foolish. Pardon the pun. Finally, beware of the counsel of anybody who offers a lot for a little. A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies ends up in poverty. The trustworthy person will get a rich reward, but a person who wants quick riches will get into trouble. Every community in the world is full of people who offer opportunities that promise a huge return for little investment or little effort. If it sounds too good to be true, guess what? So there was this scheme that was going around in our church about 10 years ago that several people got involved in that I won't name. But anyway, you would do nothing but just put in a bunch of money, and then the money was supposed to be growing. And I asked one time, I said, can you get the money out? Well, no, not really, not at first. Well, it's not your money if you can't get it out, man. Come on. I understand even in a CD or something like that, you have to get it out with a penalty, but can you get it out at all? No. And I said, well, how do you know it's there? Well, a screen was pulled up and it showed me a screen with some numbers on it. And see, there it is. I can see it. You can see it. No, man, if it's money, I don't want to see it. I want to feel it, all right? And I want to be able to have some access to it. I mean, this is where I told you a few minutes ago, having a Christian cabinet absolutely saved me. Greedy people, Solomon said, try to get rich quick, but don't realize they're headed for poverty. I showed you this man's face last week. John Johnson, who was a member here, was a Fortune 500 executive, founded the Shop and Go companies, and just one of the greatest Christian men I've ever known. So I had somebody in town at another church who was a friend of mine, had this invention and took me to breakfast, and this was way back in the 1980s or late 1980s, and had me on the verge of taking virtually every penny I had at that time and investing in it, because I'm telling you, it did sound like a wonderful, wonderful investment, and he had an early partial patent on it. And so I went back and I told Diane, and I said, I think I'm going to do it. We're going to get rich. And she said, why don't you ask John about it? So I said, John, and he said, tell you what, set up a meeting with the guy and let me go. So John and I then went to the next breakfast with him. And John asked questions I didn't even understand. And when we left the meeting, John said, now you can do it, but I'm telling you, it has about a 10% chance at best of succeeding. Now, if it succeeds at 10%, you are going to be filthy rich, I'm telling you. But I know the stepping stones in between they have to take. It's kind of like being on the Shark Tank we talked about a few minutes ago. He said, I know what's going to happen in between. And so he said, I would advise against it. And my heart was set on it. My heart was set on it. But because one of my advisors that was on my Christian cabinet said, don't do it. I didn't do it. That project sunk like a rock dropped from the atmosphere and was gone. We all need this kind of wisdom, friend, advisor, a Christian cabinet who can help us to make decisions